Hi, everybody. So it's 2 o'clock or a little bit after. I'm Robin McCallan. I'm the Executive Director of True Colors. And True Colors, as you know, does education and advocacy for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, two-spirit, same-gender living, pansexual, flexual, not straight, not labeling, straightish, straight so far, straight with options, straight but stuff happens, gender bending, bi-gender, pangender, agender, asexual, non-binary, and other sexual and gender minority youth. Welcome to the second episode of our 6-episode MiniCon series. We're really excited that today's episode is going to talk about gender and sort of the spectrum of gender. And we have a special guest joining us today, Jennifer Levi, to talk about the really terrible ruling by the Federal Department of Education. So that'll happen shortly. But I got a video yesterday or the day before from a songwriter that she asked me to share, and I thought it was really cute. So I'm going to go ahead and share that video with you. And then we're going to be introducing the members of our youth panel who are actually already on the phone and waiting. So hold on one second. Let me share my screen and we'll listen to my beat. Sorry, y'all, that was my bad. I promise I'll make this work. You didn't hear any of that because I was on mute. So here we go. Please, if the young people, the next thing we're going to do is talk to the young people. Please feel free to ask your questions and put your comments in YouTube and on the Facebook page, and they will respond to them. And I can invite all of the young people back into the live stream. So if you could turn your cameras and your unmute yourselves, that would be really great. So why don't we just start? Lou, you just have to unmute yourself there. There you go. All right, perfect. Why don't we just start with some introductions? So I'm just going to call on you as I see you on my screen. So if you want to just introduce yourself any way that you want to, and then I have a couple of questions just to start us off, and then we're going to see what comes from the folks who are listening. So Adrian, you want to start?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian. I'm non-binary, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm a high school senior in New Haven, Connecticut.
Welcome, Adrian. Sky?
Hey, my name's Sky. I'm a trans guy. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a freshman in New York City.
Great. Welcome, Sky. Lou?
Hi, I'm Lou, and I am a sophomore in high school.
Welcome, Lou. And Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm 17 years old, and I am a junior in high school in Connecticut.
Great. Thanks so much. So Adrian, and you know, those of you who are watching, Adrian and the young people, the other young people on the panel, there's 2 videos that are already on Facebook that you can watch at your leisure. The first one is by Adrian, and Adrian did just a great job of really setting the stage for having a conversation about gender. They talked about gender dysphoria, they talked about the definitions, they talked about ways of being an ally, and shared some of their own stories. So please check that one out. And then Lou and Sky and Charlie all also shared their stories on a video that's up. So please, I hope that you've watched that. If you haven't, I hope you'll get a chance to do that because the videos are both quite excellent. But here's my first question for them while for people out in the who are listening to ask. So first question. What do you like best about being who you are? What's the best part of it?
Well, for me, I think it's just a really beautiful thing to be unique and also to be authentic in who you are. So even if you are different, it's a whole nother thing to be different and actively fulfill that. So I think it's a beautiful thing to be different and express that and be open about it. And I also just love the community that I found through being trans and being non-binary. And I think it's just a really beautiful thing to be able to connect with other people, hear their stories and be able to connect, or maybe not connect sometimes, and really hear other people's journeys and be connected to others, even if you don't know them.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. Anybody else have an answer?
Yeah, I agree. Oh, you can go.
Oh, okay. So for me, I feel like being transgender has really given me a platform to speak on issues that are going on in the world, like the harassment against trans people and everything like that. I've had a lot of opportunities as far as like being in magazine articles and being able to go on TV to talk about what it's like to be transgender and the struggles that it's like to go through. And I wouldn't have that if I wasn't transgender. And I have so many friends that I've met through my community. And if I wasn't trans, I wouldn't have that. So I'm really thankful that I am trans.
Yeah. Sorry. For me, I agree with Adrian and Charlie. Just finding a community that like really gets me, and just like making new friends and having people who like understand what I've been through.
And I think it's also just shaped me as a person, just being more understanding and accepting and really fulfill my role as like an activist and within a lot of other social justice issues as well. So I'm thankful that this has shaped me to become a better person, like as a whole.
Great, thank you. Lou, you want to say something?
I just feel like, with being my true self, I've been able to create and make all these new friends and have all these new friends. And like Charlie said, if I wasn't trans, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to make these friends and have these friends and just be myself.
So one of the things that I think people often wonder about is what's it like for you in school? Like how are things for you as trans and non-binary young people in your educational settings? Now, obviously this is weird with the pandemic, but
Yeah. Well, in middle school, it was really hard for me because I was bullied a lot. And like the deans of the school didn't really understand what being trans was. And they were like, oh, it's your fault for being trans, so it's your fault for being bullied. But now that I'm stealth, it's pretty fine.
Okay. Anybody else?
For me right now, it's really difficult. I've just been getting harassed a lot. And I mean, it's been going on within like the same school system that I've been in since middle school. People still like to voice their opinions. And I mean, I live in a town where everybody's really the same. There's not a lot of diversity in my school. Everybody's just pretty much the cookie cutter, like same thing. And when you have someone who's different and people don't know what it's like to be transgender or not even know what transgender is, and then for me to be in that setting and I'm the only one and I look like the oddball out. And so it's been really hard with bullying. I've been harassed a lot more within the last few months than I have been in the past. And so like before the quarantine started, I actually made the switch to do a secondary like school. So basically instead of going to school at 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., I go later on in the afternoon. And it's been a lot easier, but it's still, I don't think that I should have to go and do a secondary school program when I was perfectly fine in the one that I was in, but I had to leave because I didn't feel comfortable.
And it got worse after the pandemic, it sounds like, Charlie.
So I probably worded it wrong, but it was really all up until the quarantine started. But since the whole pandemic has been going on, we've all been in our houses. So people haven't really seen me or haven't seen anybody. So nobody's really had the opportunity to say anything. But yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to say about school? Their experience?
For me, it's been kind of hard. I was bullied in middle school and I was actually kicked out of the girls' locker room in 8th grade for being myself and being in the place I was supposed to be. And I was called my birth name last year, actually, in a guidance office where teachers didn't do anything. It was tough, but at the end, I've stayed strong and I don't care what they think.
So it's sort of like, yeah. Adrian, you want to say?
Yeah, so I'm actually very lucky. I have not been bullied while at school, and I've actually been in a very nice environment where my teachers are supportive, which is really important to me because I don't know how I could get through high school if my teachers themselves weren't supportive. As for students, I remember when I was coming out at school, it was difficult because some people were still saying like behind my back, oh, I'm gonna call her whatever's on her birth certificate, or like just some really nasty things about me and not wanting to respect my name or pronouns. But I just didn't let that get to me. And as for bathrooms, I also just wish there was something I could do about it more. Like I've mentioned to them about gender neutral bathrooms, but they're always just locked. But I do feel uncomfortable in the girls' bathroom as well. So it's kind of just like a limbo of what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. Some schools, I know one of the high schools we worked with, they transitioned all of the single stall bathrooms. They changed the lock so that they locked from the inside instead of the outside. And then they made them all gender bathrooms, which is something that schools can do relatively easily and without a lot of expense. And that, and that protects and creates safety for everybody. because anybody who wants a little additional privacy should have the ability to go to a space that's a little bit more private. So, you know, that's often a really good solution for schools. So one of the things that people often also wonder is, how could they be the best ally for trans and non-binary folks and the people that they care about? Like, or even if you don't know somebody who's trans or non-binary, or think that you don't know somebody who's trans or non-binary, what are the things that you wish people would remember to do that would be helpful to you?
I would say treat me like I'm anybody else. Like, don't even think that I'm trans. Just treat me like you knew me before you found out. And that's really all I ask for.
Yeah, just be respectful.
Yeah.
You know, I tell people when I do trainings, I tell people, listen, you know, the truth is that in some ways you don't really have to understand, and you can't really understand if it's not your experience. You can't really understand. You don't have to understand. You just have to accept and respect, right? You just have to say, you know, you, okay. Who are you? What name do you want me to use? What pronoun? Let's go from there, right? That's it. That's just so easy to just be human like that, right? Other ideas that you have, that you would think would be helpful for people to know as an ally?
I think that along with just respecting and accepting people in general, using gender inclusive language can be important. And just like, if you have a friend and they're not out yet or whatever, it's really nice to that ally to the trans community or stand up against transphobia that can really show that, yes, this is someone who's still going to be friends with me regardless of if I'm out or not. And really just proving yourself as an ally and showing up. And that's really important to have your friend know that you accept them. And just associating with people who aren't queerphobic is also important to show that your friend should be able to feel safe around you.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Anything you want to add to that?
I think Sky and Adrian really covered the basis of like what you can do as far as being accepting. So I don't really have anything to add on to that.
I often use, I stole this from somebody else, but I think it's just a great phrase. You know, when you hear mean, intervene, right? So when you hear somebody say something mean, say something back, right? And that I really think that that's one of the best ways that people can be allies, that if somebody says something about an identity that you don't have, that you know, something, especially something mean about an identity that you don't share, to be able to be the person who say, hey, that's not cool, or I don't like that, or I feel differently, or I don't agree with that, or ouch, or what made you say that, or saying something, because if you say something, people know that what they just said was not okay, and at least it gives them an opportunity to think about that. Because the problem is, if we don't say something, if you're an ally and you hear something and you don't say something, you have said something. You said that what just happened was okay with you, and that's just not. I don't even think that's what you mean, you know. So if you hear mean, intervene. All right.
Another important part of that, I think, is even if it's not directed at someone, like if they're like making a joke, like calling someone gay or something, like, and the other person knows it's a joke, it's still important to intervene.
Right. Exactly. Because some things are just not funny.
Yeah.
They're just not funny. Right. There's a number of folks who've been putting messages in the chat box, and that a number of folks are saying how much they appreciate you for being both brave and courageous enough to be yourself, and courageous enough to be able to talk with other people about that. That's something that's pretty amazing, and obviously appreciated by the people that are listening. So we're getting close on time. So I have one last question. Is there one thing, if you could tell somebody one thing about your identity as a trans or non-binary person, what's the one thing that you would want them to know?
So really for me, as a transgender girl, I believe that I shouldn't be looked at as a boy, or say someone wanted to go out with me or something like that, that they not be listed as gay, just things like that. Because at the end of the day, I'm a regular girl. I'm just as much female as everybody else is. Just because I didn't come out of my mom with female body parts doesn't mean that I'm not feminine, or on the inside I'm not a girl, or that it should degrade me as a person.
Right, right. So just recognize that first you're a girl, and trans is one of the other parts of your identity. You're a girl who happens to be trans.
I'm Charlie, but that comes before being trans. Like, I feel like everybody looks at me as trans. Like, trans is the first thing, and then we can look at the other things that make Charlie Charlie. But I feel like that's the first
Charlie
thing that people see.
Yeah. Charlie should be the first thing. Okay, great. Yeah. Other people, what's one thing you would tell?
I just want people to know that, you know, I am, like Charlie said, I'm just like every other girl, and trans is just something that happens to also be in the picture, but I just want to be treated like every other girl, and, you know, not have that something that comes up like 24/7, and just be equally treated, and just be able to be myself without any problem.
Yeah. You want to go through the world as Lou, not as Lou, the trans girl. Yeah. Sky, you want to say anything?
Yeah. Just like kind of what they were saying, like with my friends, I'm just another guy. I'm not like, oh, this trans person who's just hanging out with us, which is what it used to be in middle school. Like I want to be treated like I'm just another guy, like talk to him, whatever, anyone else.
Adrian, we're going to give you the last word.
For me, just as a non-binary person, I just want to stress that like pronouns are important for any trans person, and that they're required and they're not preferred, and they can really make a huge difference to somebody's well-being and self-esteem. And also that, like for me, my gender presentation can change, and even if I'm dressed feminine, my pronouns are still they, them. And I think just that people need to get past seeing gender as, okay, well, if you're this gender, you have to dress like this and act like this, because nothing should be attached to those. And I think just understanding that that it's all just a made up structure, and that people are fluid and can be free and can dress anyway and identify as anything while doing that. I think it's just important to be able to separate expression and presentation and understand that they can work together in any way. And of course, to respect people's names and pronouns, no matter what they look like, or if they don't meet how you think a trans person should look or act like.
Exactly. And that, the person is the person, and the person's in the lead. And it's our job to respect who they tell us that they are, and that who they are doesn't, is not reflective of how they're dressing right this moment. It's about your identity and who you are. And so thank you all very, very much. I think that what you had to say was really powerful. I think that it's important for people that are listening to recognize that when you're listening to youth voices, we're not listening to the leaders of tomorrow. We're really listening to the leaders of right now, that these young people are leading the way in creating a world in which people of all orientations and genders will be valued and affirmed. And I think they needed to be celebrated and applauded for that. So thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
And don't forget to watch their videos, because they're really good.
Yes.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you.
All right, see you later. All right, so in the waiting room right now are two folks who have been very active in transgender rights and responsibilities, both on the legal front and on the advocacy front. So I'm going to bring both of them into the room right now and ask them to introduce themselves. And obviously our focus right now is on the ruling, the really hideous ruling by the Civil Rights Office at the Federal Department of Education that essentially says the trans girls are not girls. You just saw the young people on the video. Trans girls are girls, trans boys are boys, and non-binary people are non-binary people. They are who they are, and it's our job to make sure that they have full access to all of the human rights that everyone else has. So I'm going to admit Asaph and Jennifer. Asaph, did I say your name correctly? That's an interesting sound that's coming through. So Asaph's, am I saying his name correctly? Their name correctly, Jennifer, do you know?
No, it's Asaph.
Asaph. I don't know if you can hear us. I don't see you having, you're not muted, but you might want to, sometimes you need to sort of leave and come back, and that will let you back in. In the meantime, while you're
Robin, just so, are Asaph and I both talking about the Title IX?
I don't know. I didn't know that Asaph was coming on. So.
Oh, you know what? I know what happened. I know what happened. That was a mistake. I will clear that up, I think.
All righty. So I'll just talk a little bit about what's been going on, Jennifer, while you're doing that.
Yeah. Are we on live? Sorry.
You're on live, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I've made a million mistakes already today, so it's just part of the.
Cool. I'm here.
You're here.
Hello.
All right. So welcome. Do you want to tell
Thank
us
you.
about? Do you want to, give us a little background on what's going on?
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it to you to talk. And
that sounds good. But Robin, you should feel free to jump in either with questions. And I don't know if there's an opportunity for folks that are joining to submit chat questions, but they're welcome to do that
as they come in. So
great. And yeah, my goal is really just to clear up and respond to any questions that have been raised. But I really appreciate you inviting me. And I think this is such an important conference. I know that there's a lot of concern because of the reports that came out yesterday through an AP article about a letter that was issued by the US Department of Education Office of Civil Rights to the schools in Connecticut and the CIAC that have been defending trans-inclusive sports policy. So as folks may know, I know this has gone on for a number of years, but it may be new to some other individuals. Connecticut law is extraordinarily strong and supportive with regard to the inclusion of transgender students in schools, including in all aspects of curricular life at schools and sports. So that has been a very important law and policy for transgender students, and really in many ways a model for the rest of the country. There was a number of track events where the two transgender girls participated and have done quite well. They've worked hard, trained hard in their sports, and there were complaints that were brought, formal legal complaints that were brought by 3 non-transgender girls who filed what are called Title IX complaints at the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. And they alleged that the participation of these transgender athletes, these girls, violates federal laws prohibiting sex discrimination in schools. And that was really a coordinated effort along with a right-wing legal organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom to challenge, really challenge equality for and inclusion for transgender students in schools. So that complaint was brought over a year ago at the Office of Civil Rights. And then more recently, there was a federal lawsuit that was filed also by the Alliance Defending Freedom on behalf of these non-transgender girls suing because of transgender students participating in high school sports. And that federal lawsuit, I just want to make clear, is ongoing, and I can kind of talk about what the status of that lawsuit is. But what happened yesterday is that there were reports about a letter that was issued by the Federal Office of Civil Rights that basically says that the CIAC, that's the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference's transgender inclusive policy, violates Title IX. So that's, very troubling, very, very concerning. But I want to say a couple of things about that right at the outset. And that is that there is nothing imminent that is going to change based on the letter that the Office of Civil Rights issued yesterday. So that's, one really important fact to understand. The letter does not contain any legal analysis, just to say, and is basically a summary of the what happened in terms of the participation of both the transgender athletes and the non-transgender athletes, and various communications between the parents and the families and the school over the course of time when that was happening. And the letter that was issued by the Office of Civil Rights is very much in line with what we have seen come from this current administration, the Trump administration. And it clearly seems to be part of an ongoing effort to strategically reverse established protections for the transgender community. We've seen that happen in a range of different contexts, including rollbacks, proposed rollbacks in the areas of healthcare access and housing access and education and beyond. So, this is very troubling news, but it's certainly not surprising in terms of what we've seen coming out of this administration. So I want to be really clear that what happened yesterday was the issuance of a letter. Okay, nothing happens imminently, but it is absolutely part of the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights strategy to push both the CIAC and the schools that are currently in litigation. The reality is that the federal case that I mentioned that has been filed is where the legal issues are ultimately going to be sorted out, and we are really quite a ways off from that happening. So just to say a couple things about the lawsuit. As I mentioned, it was filed by the Alliance Defending Freedom on behalf of 3 non-transgender girls, athletes, and it was brought against the CIAC as well as a number of schools where the sports events had taken place in Connecticut. The transgender athletes have also intervened in the case, so they are represented by the ACLU, and the CIAC and the schools have been vigorously defending the trans-inclusive policies, and they have stated publicly that they'll continue to do so. So that's important, and really the result of tremendous advocacy by transgender students and families and allies and supporters over the years. So they're, they are in a good and important place in terms of the process for that lawsuit. So I do want to say at the same time, about that federal lawsuit. So the state law is very much on our side, and it really, both the schools and the CIIC have talked about the importance of having sports policies that include transgender athletes because of the state law. But the reality is that federal law is on our side as well. There have been a number of federal cases brought by transgender students and defending inclusive policies, and federal law is on our side in that regard as well. I do want to say at the same time, there are cases that many folks may have been following at the Supreme Court on cases in which LGBT plaintiffs brought claims under federal employment law, that's Title VII, in which the question about the scope of federal Title VII law will be resolved by the Supreme Court. And we're expecting those decisions really any day now, so stay tuned about those. But I do want to say, even though those cases are based on federal employment law. The analysis in those cases may very well inform the direction in which other federal non-discrimination laws that prohibit sex discrimination, like Title IX, go. So we have to keep an eye on those cases to really understand the full legal landscape around these issues. So I also want people to keep in mind the context both of the cases and these issues. As you all know, and I'm a parent of teens, so I've been following this very closely as well. You know, no schools are in session. All of the spring sports have been canceled. To my knowledge, there's been no intended or no expected specific timeframe for resumption of sports, including what's going to happen in the fall. So there's all of that to keep in mind as things are kind of percolating and heading forward.
One of the questions that's come up, and so I know that this is like, we brought you because we had like a really short period of time.
Yeah.
So I think one of the questions that came up from folks that are listening is, so what do we do? Like,
yeah.
There's politicians who believe that these cisgender girls are right. And actually one of the people that had a really cogent argument for why that was stupid, but you know, what should we tell people who want to advocate on behalf of trans athletes? What should they be doing?
Yeah, so great question. So there are a number of things that people can do. And I want to say that the advocacy around transgender athletes is really part and parcel of the advocacy for transgender people at large, right? I mean, it's clearly a strategy and a tactic of the other side to more narrowly focus in on this issue of sports and leverage misunderstandings, bias, stereotypes, to try to divide and peel away the strength of the support that has been created for transgender people. So it's really important for people to both speak out about in support of the policies that are currently in place, and that means at the state level, but it also means in schools and districts and with school commissions. It's really essential that it comes from both, you know, families who have loved ones who are impacted by these policies, but it's really important that it also comes from allies and supporters as well, who speak out for the importance of including transgender young people across the full range of school contexts, including in sports, and really explaining what we know, right? Which is that if transgender young people can't participate in sports in schools and are called out and have their identities rejected, it really means that they're going to be excluded from all of the programs in schools. They'll be made targets for harassment and abuse. And so speaking out, reaching out to school districts, making sure, what we know is that the right wing is trying to instill fear in schools and districts and pointing to the voices coming from opposition to say, you know, roll back these policies. And we really need our side to be vocal and supportive for inclusive policies. I can keep going, but I want to say, Robin, that having express protections in federal law is going to become important. Is important, and it's going to become even more essential as we see the conservatism of the judiciary playing out in the reality of people's lives. Oh, I can't hear you.
One person asked if it does end up, you know, if it ends up in the Superior Court or in the Supreme Court, you know, is there, you know, you know what I mean, like,
is there hope? Is there a chance?
Is there hope?
Look, look, here's what I want to say. We are in a long-term civil rights struggle, right? We always have been. There's no easy answers. And until we can really broaden the support of the community, have people know how their loved ones and friends are impacted, there's not going to be like a silver bullet for winning in any particular context. And look, I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. I think the law is on our side. Like I absolutely do. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean the Supreme Court is either going to agree with me, or even if the Supreme Court does, frankly, that Congress couldn't, change the law in response to a favorable Supreme Court decision. So there's no one way to ensure that this is not going to be an ongoing engaged effort that we have to partake in, but that just really calls upon all of us to work that much harder to be vocal about the impact on transgender young people of excluding them from, any aspect of life, and certainly in schools.
One of the I think we have time for like one last question, but one of the people asked, like, how are we going to support schools who are afraid they're going to lose funding?
Yeah. Yeah. So
that
one
was
thing,
a threat in the that was one of the threats in the letter.
it is one of the threats, and I just want to be clear. I understand that there has never been an instance where the Office of Civil Rights has denied funding for a school based on Title IX violations. And on top of that, if you look at the inequities in school sports in Connecticut, there's like a disparity of 9,000 opportunities between girls and boys in Connecticut schools. So the idea that two transgender athletes are the source of the kind of real and serious disparities that exist in schools, it's just not, it's not real. So the funding threat is one that absolutely is often wielded, but to my understanding from Office of Civil Rights, like never carried out. That doesn't mean it won't happen. This administration has taken steps unlike any that we've seen before. But I do think one of the things that folks on this call can do is make it really clear to any schools or teachers or administrators that ask that there is no change in the law, no federal funding has happened, there's no enforcement that's imminent, and that this issue is being resolved in federal court. So and I'll also say that any schools that do reverse policy will be in violation of state law, and that's likely to invite a lawsuit as well.
Yeah, and so here's somebody who wants a response to this. They want to know, what do you say if somebody says, well, so what if a couple of trans kids get left out? What's the difference?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is, of course, it's not a couple of trans kids, right? I mean, it's really, to reverse the sports policy sends a message that all transgender young people are not welcome in schools and not supported in schools. But I'll also say that sends a message to all marginal and vulnerable kids of all, genders, gender identities, races, religions, that schools are not a place that are welcoming and supportive. And as you know, Robin, and I think as folks that are listening know, that's really at the heart of the kind of suicide rates that we've seen. And so it's just essential that we also know that bullying and harassment is about climate ultimately. And commitment to non-discrimination policies and enforcement and inclusion are critical to improve climate for all students.
Exactly. Jennifer, thank you so much. This was a last minute thing. You rearranged your schedule and were able to join us. And I'm just really grateful, obviously grateful for the work that you do, but also grateful that you were willing to come on and share with the folks who are listening. And this is also being recorded, so it will be on our YouTube page so that people can watch it later and continue the conversation about making sure that we're all involved as allies to make sure that all of our kids are welcome, valued, and affirmed and receive a safe and equitable education.
Yeah. Can I make one last plug?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
So anyone who is impacted in any way by either this OCR letter or any of the reactions to it or the federal lawsuit, I urge you to contact GLAD Answers, and you can either call us at the phone number or take a look, which is 1-800-455-GLAD, but also take a look at www.glad.org. And we want to make sure that we can limit as much of the harm as possible that we see coming from yesterday's announcement.
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to pass that information along because I've had some phone calls today from people who are feeling very impacted. So Jennifer, thank you again. Thanks to GLAD, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Hearts.
You're the best, Robin.
All right.
Love
Thank
True Colors.
You,
yeah. Bye.
Okay. So I don't know why. Let me get this out of here. Sorry. Exit full screen. There we go. So I'm going to bring in Marcel now. I'm going to get out of this view. I don't know how to get him out of that view. Somehow I'm in this wrong view. There we go. So I'm going to bring in Marcel to have a conversation. And I think Marcel has some really interesting stories and interesting experiences. I've known Marcel for a really long time. He's a dancer, he's a choreographer, he's a singer, he's been a staff member at True Colors, he's been an advocate and a supporter. And so just 1 second while I bring him into the room. And I'm looking forward to a conversation with Marcel. So he's joining. Hey, Marcel, I see you coming on up. And Asaf, if you could back out, that would be really great. All right. Marcel, I see you coming on up. And Asaf, if you could back out. Oh, you know what, Marcel? You must be watching yourself on the thing, so you got to make sure you turn the sound off on that.
Yeah, just turned it off. There you go.
There you go. One of the things that you might have noticed is, or that you will notice when you watch this, is that there's a time delay. So, you know, there's like 30 seconds before it gets on there. So I'm going to change the speaker view so that when you start talking, you're going to be the main person. And
Okay.
So we want to start with, you know, just tell me your story, Marcel.
Hi guys and girls and everybody in between. Hi, so my name is Marcel Jennings. I go by a couple different names. Some people may know me as Kocha in the dance community. Some people knows me as Ms. October in the drag community. But overall, this is me. Hi. What can I say? I've been dancing forever. Started dancing when I was 5. I am now 29. I turned 29 about 3 weeks ago. Just putting that out there. I studied jazz, ballet, tap, but I first started with African dance. So African dance was my first ever style that I ever tried, and then I like dabbled into everything else after that. Through dance, I got introduced into the ballroom scene, which is definitely different than the dance world. And being introduced to that, I was introduced to different dance forms, such as Vogue, one of my favorite dance forms. So I learned a little bit of that. I've been in a battle, not a battle, but I've been to a ball and I competed in a ball. I've competed in a couple different mini balls, but yeah, that was a thing. And then through that, I guess I got into drag, and now I'm a drag queen. It's kind of weird, but I'm doing it. But yeah, I've only been doing drag for, I want to say it's going on 2 years. Started really in 2018, and won my first competition. And when I won my first competition, I just kept going. So yeah, the drag thing has changed a lot of me and my life and how I see certain things and how I see myself, and it kind of sort of brings all of my training and what I've been doing my whole entire life all together. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey I've had on 29 years, but a journey nonetheless.
Do you want to say more about what it was like for you? So first of all, you know, growing up in Hartford as a young gay Black man, there's that. And then, and so like in the hyper masculinity that exists out in the world. So there's that piece. But what, you know, so I want to hear a little bit about that. I'd also want to hear a little bit about, you know, what was it, how did you discover and get access to October and the feminine side of yourself?
Okay, so like you said, I born and raised in Hartford. And like you can see when you walk out on the streets in Hartford, you can see very, very masculine appearing men. You don't really see the feminine type of guy that's walking down the street, but you see everybody that's in this like hyper masculine mask, and that's a toxic mask for young Black men. specifically, because how can I say this? It's toxic because it's damaging to who you are and who you can become. And it's hindering and puts us a halt on that whole process. So me growing up in Hartford, in that environment, dance was that outlet. For me, specifically, I started really dancing at not True Colors, I'm sorry, the Artist Collective, did the rites of passage there, and it was okay to be a little bit more feminine. It was okay to move your hips. It was okay to do this, and it was okay to do that, and I loved it. Like, I got to be me. So, like, it was a new world, and that was the start of me finding out who I am. But like I said, hyper masculine Hartford streets. So although I grew up in Hartford, I didn't go to school in Hartford. So this makes me a little bit more different than the people that I would normally hang out with in Hartford. Just because now I speak clearly. I don't really speak with any slang terms or anything like that. So I am now the white boy. Clearly you can see I'm not that. I may have blonde tips, but that's it. But so that, on top of having the whole hyper masculine outside looking in at you, and they're just like basically judging you if you twitch your hip just a little bit. But when I got into the dance studio, the dance area, that was all thrown out the window. So when I got older and got into the voguing and all that fun stuff, at first it was off-putting to me because I'm like, I don't know why would I want to move my hips like that? And I judged it at first. I will say that. You heard it first. I judged it at first. And I felt like it wasn't for me because of what I thought was what was supposed to be me at the time. So I didn't really get into it until I was in my 20s. I basically was introduced to it through Studio 860, who had another individual who is now in New York. His name is Shane, who basically, he was like this Vogue guru person. He loved it. And I would just watch him. And everything he did, I would go home and mimic it. And I basically, it registered in my brain, like, he's doing this in the dance studio where he can be free and he has nobody judging him. So that's when I started doing it with him and started picking his brain and started getting into that side of Marcel. A lot of people, when it comes to me, I get judged a lot because of the whole drag aspect and how I got into the drag world. The main thing I get from people that find out that I am October: you do drag, you don't look like you do. And my question to them is, so how does a person that does drag look on a daily basis? Please let me know. Show me a picture. I want to know who this person is, because if they can teach me something, they can teach me something. I'm always open to learning. So that, for me, when I first started doing drag, because it was a hush hush thing. I didn't tell a lot of people. Only my close friends knew. It was, like I said, hush hush. So I would do a competition, but you won't see another competition from me in a month, 2 months, 3 months. At one point, drag was bothering me because of certain comments I would get from other people who aren't Black, and they don't paint like me, so they don't really know what it is that goes into being a drag queen of color, because it takes a lot of work to find my shade. I have to mix certain shades together to get my complexion, because I am a darker skin tone, and most foundations are super, super light. Not everybody has money for Fenty. Fenty's expensive. So the comment was that I am another basic Black drag queen with a nice lace front. And that turned me off. So I stopped doing it for a little bit. And there was one person, and he was like, you can't let that happen. This is what you're gonna do. And the next time you get on stage, I'm gonna be on stage with you. So basically, I call this person my brother. His name is TJ. He was he's straight. Like he was my biggest ally, and he pushed me to be me because he knew who Marcel was, and he knew that, yeah, they just made a certain comment about your skin tone, but you are better than that and you're above that. So you need to go back out there and do it again and make them eat their words, kind of deal. So that's what ultimately got me back and going. And my best friend TJ, he passed away in 2018. When I really started getting into my drag for real. And basically every time I do drag, I do it as if I am performing on stage with him because he wanted to be on stage with me. So when I go into my drag shows,
to him.
What was that?
What a beautiful tribute to him and your relationship, and what an amazing story about an ally, you know, a person. Yeah, that's amazing, Marcel. That's really touching.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that story, and I don't really like go out and tell people that story because I don't like the whole crying or make people feeling bad for me, because it's not really people. Like, I don't feel bad. Yes, I lost someone very special. I lost somebody that meant the world to me, but he's always with me, especially when I'm on stage, because I always feel his energy when I'm on stage. If I ever show you guys a video of when we worked together and when he was here on Earth with us, you can see his energy, and literally October exudes that energy. That's her energy. She's like, that I am TJ at this moment, I am here. So that's where a lot of October's drive comes from.
Yeah. One of the questions from folks who are watching is, and you answered a bunch of them as they were coming down, but one of them was, what do you hope your drag does for queer youth, for youth right now? So you as October, what contribution do you hope October makes for youth in drag?
Okay, so this is a big question.
Yeah.
So I would want every single human being on Earth that is young and want to get into drag, and I just want them to just be them. Just be you, because it's already hard enough trying to be everything that everybody else wants you to be. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what we do every day in our life. We wear different costumes every day in life. We have our work mask, and then we have our home mask, and then we have our mask with our friends, and we have our mask with our family. But what is that mask you wear when you're by yourself? I know I don't even wear a mask by myself. That's how I know I can be myself when I'm October. So yes, I wear tons of makeup and really tight clothes and layers of tights, but I get to be more like Marcel in October's form than Marcel's form. Wow.
That's powerful. We only have a couple more minutes, so I'm wondering, do you have advice for young people that are looking to explore their drag personas, and you know, do you have any advice?
Yes, I do. And it's something I wish somebody told me. There's two things, actually. Don't take it seriously. When you first start out, I'm just going to say it. You're going to be hit. You're going to look like a truck then ran over your face. Your costumes won't probably fit right. But as long as you're having fun on stage, that's all that matters. You can be a train wreck, but if you are being you and having fun, that's it. And the second thing, don't buy expensive makeup the first time around because you don't know what you're doing. It's just wasteful.
Yeah, that's really great. That's wonderful, Marcel. You know, I'm so glad that you came on. I always enjoy talking with you and seeing you, and you know, I've certainly known you for a long time, and And I have loved watching October, sort of grow. And this is sort of the last question, that one of the things that October is growing into a drag community that embraces lots of different ways to do gender, right? That it's really not a binary system that you're really engaged with. Tell me a little bit more about what kind of freedom that offers to not have to be a certain way, or to consider this is men and this is women.
Okay, so the best way I can put this is I can talk about a performance that I wanted to do really, really bad. I ended up doing it, but my biggest hang up was that the song was done by a male, and I'm a drag queen. I'm supposed to be a female impersonator. Like every time I hear somebody talk about drag, and they're always talking about doing female songs. I never hear anybody talking about, let me do this male song or this male rapper or this male singer. So it's interesting because you are a drag queen, you are in your persona. If anything speaks to you musically, whether it's male, female, fish, dog, color blue or green, if it speaks to you, it speaks to you. So why not perform it? So those drag queens have to be males, or drag kings have to be females impersonating males. I think that's all crap. It's all thrown out the window. I feel like Connecticut's a really good example of that. I have a trans brother in my house, and they perform as a drag queen.
Yeah.
And there's no boundaries, there's no rules when it comes to drag. If somebody tells you that there's rules to it, they're lying. The only rule is to have fun. That's it.
That's great. That's so great. I love that. I'm gonna put that up on my wall. I think the only rule is to have fun. Right?
Exactly. If you're not having fun, then why are you doing it?
That's so great. If you're not having fun, why are you doing it? Exactly. That's a great note to end on. Marcel, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
See you soon, I hope.
Bye. Yes, very soon.
Very soon. Take care, honey. And take care. I don't know what's going on with your finger, but take care of that.
Oh, it'll be fine.
All right, babe. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
All right. So Marcel is going to be lead. Yep, there he goes. I got to get back up here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce our next person. And I'm really excited. I'm going to let Dr. AJ Eckert introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their practice and what they're doing. And then we're really going to throw it open to your questions and answers about some of the healthcare options that are available for trans and non-binary folks. So let me admit Dr. AJ into the room. And there they are. They're coming. There they are. And let's see if the AJ, can you hear me yet?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. All right. So why don't we start by having you, introduce yourself and your practice, and then we'll go into the Q&A.
All right. I just realized my background, yours is so great. I've got a shovel behind me, but anyway, so I'm Dr. AJ Eckert. I am a board certified family medicine doctor, but I specialize in LGBTQ health, and that's my own specialization and interest. That's always been an interest of mine. I opened my own clinic in September of 2018 in Wethersfield, and it's called the GLAM Center, which stands for Gender and Life Affirming Medicine. So I do primary care services, preventive health, osteopathic care, because I'm an osteopathic physician, and then I also provide hormone services. So that includes any gender affirming hormones, as well as puberty blockers. I see kids. I think the youngest kid I have right now is 10 years old.
Okay. All right, great. And that's located in Wethersfield, right?
Ostensibly, right now is a little tough with everything happening. So I am only doing telemedicine for have been only doing telemedicine since March, and that's probably going to continue throughout the summer. I'm not taking any chances. So hopefully we'll be back in Wethersfield. Might need to move the office, but I'm still definitely seeing patients as is.
How has telemedicine changed things for you?
I would say that in some cases it's been really good because I have folks who are more comfortable being in their own homes and calling in to talk. And I totally get that as somebody who tries to actively create a safe space for my patients and do really good trauma-informed care. It's really important for me for my patients to be comfortable. So for a lot of them, they view it as an advantage. It's also tough because I like to see people in person. I like to be able to, as an osteopath, part of that is being able to kind of have that in-person connection. So it's been difficult, but it's doable. And it's what we need to do for now. So we've just kind of pivoted and adjusted,
into that. One of the things that comes up a lot, and you know True Colors and what we do, and so a lot of the young people that we work with have some relationship with the Department of Children and Families. Some of the young people, are in families that don't accept or don't approve of their identities. And one of the questions that comes up all the time, even with families that really do support their young person, is the worry about what's the impact of adding hormones. So, the best practices really is that young people, begin puberty blockers as they begin to move into puberty. But what are the pros and cons, would you say, of puberty blockers at different ages for young people?
So I would say that it is also really important to distinguish puberty blockers from hormones because puberty blockers are not hormones. The only thing that blockers do is essentially that thing. They stop puberty. So they put puberty on hold. So a lot of folks worry that we are starting hormones in young children and that we're essentially doing irreversible damage by introducing hormones, which nobody starts hormones until they're ready, and no one starts hormones at the beginning of puberty. The whole goal of blockers is just to give mostly the family a little bit of time to process, and it's also a good interim step before starting actual gender affirming hormones. So I would say that I don't see many disadvantages of starting blockers when someone is expressing that their identity is not what they were assigned at birth. I would say that a major advantage is that you are able to reduce the comorbidities that come with not being affirmed and not treating in time. We have seen evidence that watchful waiting can be just as harmful as reparative or conversion therapy, because essentially watchful waiting is also not really supporting your child or teen, because you're saying, well, you can't possibly know that right now. You're too young to know, or, well, you could still potentially change your mind. And cisgender, transgender, genderqueer kids, they all know at the same time what their gender identity is. There's a lot of environmental and social factors that come into play after that, but identities are all valid across the board. So I try to encourage the conversation around blockers to be, well, they aren't hormones. They're just putting puberty on hold. Once you stop blockers, if, say, someone stops blockers, what'll happen is that the puberty that for the body that they were assigned at birth, that will resume. And so that's the only thing that happens. And then most kids, what I see happening is they'll take blockers and then we do initiate hormones at some point. And so, in either case, blockers on their own, they're not hormones, and starting them, especially around like Tanner stage 2, which is in the early stages of puberty, can be really, really helpful. And it helps reduce that distress around puberty that a lot of folks start to experience because their body is changing in ways that they didn't sign up for.
That's great. That's really helpful. And I think that reframing and the understanding that puberty blockers are not hormones, I think that's something that people misunderstand all the time. So that's a great clarification. If you're working with a family and they've been on, a young person who's been on puberty blockers for a while, and then they start to consider gender affirming hormones, what's that process like? How do people go about that?
Sure. So I would say that just like everything with gender affirming care, it's going to be individualized and different for everybody. So the entire goal of using blockers and using hormones is to make that kid look like their peers. So what do the boys in your grade look like? Are they all, have they all gone through puberty already? And are you kind of lagging behind? And then we also take into account things like the individual's own kind of maturity levels. So I have a couple of patients who are 14 and have started doing some form of low dose hormones along with the blockers. And I have a couple who are just not ready yet. They're just not there. So it really is working with the parents and the kid and hearing what they want from all of this, how they want to get started. A lot of times, especially with the younger kids, there's this urgency to get started now. And a lot of it is also answering the expectation of, well, right now, if we give you full dose hormones, you're going to end up with a beard where nobody in your class has that yet. Or you're going to go through some of these changes much faster and you don't want to do that either. So the general idea is just to make these kids look like their peers and feel comfortable interacting with their peers and to be able to align with the gender that they align with.
How does this play out for kids who are really more non-binary? What kind of variations have you seen around non-binary youth?
Sure. So I think with the non-binary options, that's something that is definitely a work in progress. There's not a lot of medical evidence or advice out there. So for instance, with my non-binary adults, a lot of times we'll do microdosing. So we'll basically, all that means is using much lower doses of hormones and maybe going slower or maybe just using them for a period of time. And so similarly with my non-binary kids, sometimes it's just starting even lower. So we already start at the lower end of hormones and up them in a different rate than we would in adults. But with non-binary kids, those who are still kind of exploring, a lot of times, and again, it's completely based around what is this person hoping to achieve? So when I do an intake, I'll ask, what do you see? What is it that you want to look like? What are the things that make you the most dysphoric? Like, what is the stuff that bothers you? What doesn't bother you? And a lot of times it's just adjusting based on that and understanding that the minute you start introducing hormones, there's not really a gender neutral option. So there's a way to make someone certainly if they're desiring a more androgynous look, to get someone closer to that. But anytime you're going to introduce gender affirming hormones, you can't really control for everything because it is going through second puberty. So it's going to be based in your personal genetics and those kind of factors as well. So back to, I'm so sorry, I keep kind of going off, but so back to just the options for non-binary kids, I would say if they're hoping to get started on hormones, if they're at the point where we're talking about hormones, we're going to be talking about probably going even slower and starting lower. And the idea is to have it be more in their control.
Thanks. And another question in my head that brought up in that. Somebody said on one of the questions that came up is, do people stay on blockers after they go onto affirming hormones?
Yes. So generally, we keep people on blockers for because if you then stop the blockers, you're going to see a lot of things happen with their nascent puberty that they don't necessarily want to get put through. So so say somebody is taking feminizing hormones and blockers, we would generally continue those feminizing hormones until they have had an orchiectomy, or basically until they have had removal of the testes, so that they're not producing that hormone. But it's not always the case. So sometimes we do have options to start kind of transitioning into more adult hormones, but with the blockers, we do use like Eligard, Lupron. It is still used in adults as a potential androgen blocker. So especially in the feminizing regimens, yes, we do continue it throughout, and then we may adjust it just depending on age and depending on surgeries at that point.
So, I want to be clear. So if somebody is not planning to have any sort of surgical interventions, would they then need to stay on both the hormone blockers and the either masculinizing or feminizing hormones?
No. So you don't really want to use puberty blockers for more than about 3 to 4 years. And so generally we try not to keep people on it for more than about 3 years, 3 to 4, because they're the only side effect of blockers that we have seen happen is a decrease in bone density, which we have only seen actually, and this has only been studied in cisgender kids, so kids who are not going to be taking hormones later, because the minute you introduce hormones, that effect completely dissipates. So, but back to that question. So for masculinizing regimens, once you get the testosterone level to where it is at basically standard levels where it's going to be suppressing everything, you can stop the blockers. For feminizing, it would be getting to a point where you're ready to switch over to more of the adult options for blockers, such as spironolactone or bicalutamide, something like that.
Somebody also asked, after the pandemic is over, are you going to keep having telemedicine as an option for people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've actually seen a bunch of new patients this way. And it's been kind of nice because they've been from all over Connecticut. Insurance-wise, I can only see people in Connecticut right now. It would be great if they expanded that. I would absolutely love that, because I kind of get questions from all over, and I'd love to be able to help folks all over. But yes, I want to be able to keep it on as an option, as long as insurance, if there is a way, and I will definitely be talking to the insurance companies so that I don't see it going away though. I don't see telemedicine going away that quickly, especially with everything that we've seen in the last few months. Certainly, I think it's been something where I've gotten a lot of folks who have given me positive feedback on it. So yeah, I would love to keep it as an option.
I don't know if you were able to hear anything that was happening in the sessions before you came on.
I have patience, but
yes, I didn't think so. But we had just before Marcel was on, right before you, but right before Marcel, Jennifer Levi was on talking about the letter from the Civil Rights Office at the Department of Education, basically saying that trans girls are not girls, in athletics. Have you had any feedback from young people or distress from people around that ruling, or do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I run my own YouTube channel, and I've made a few videos about it because of how strongly I feel about it, and the fact that the science really doesn't back what the Alliance Defending Freedom and all of these conservative alt-right groups are trying to say. And so, yeah, what I would have to say to that is that trans women are women, trans men are men. I mean, just period. There shouldn't be any question. I never understand this obsession over an individual's genitalia that the right seems to have. I find it to be really disturbing that this is where we are, and that kind of ruling could be made right now. I think it's completely unfair that these 17-year-old athletes are being targeted like this, and that they actually have to go through this solely because of what their gender identity is. It just, I don't think scientifically and medically it makes any kind of sense to be supporting that trans women don't belong on women's teams. I mean, trans women are women and they should be allowed to participate in sports on women's teams. That's just the bottom line for me with any of that. So yeah, we are going to be, I'm part of the Connecticut Trans Advocacy Coalition board as well. So we will be meeting and discussing all of that further and essentially putting together an opposition to the ruling. And yes, I'm very invested in working on this.
That's great. I was on a call yesterday with the Connecticut Health and Human Services, the LGBT Health and Human Services Network, and Diana Lombardi, who's part of the ED at Trans Advocacy, was on. They're creating a subcommittee, that organization is creating a subcommittee to work with CAIC and begin, putting together some process around this. Jennifer was really clear on the phone today that nothing is going to happen right now, right? That there is no immediate impact of this, and it doesn't have any sort of legal bite behind it. That the lawsuit is in progress, but we have to begin preparing. And I thought one of the things that Jennifer said that was really helpful is the idea that we really need to advocate for a federal protection, so that there isn't the possibility of people, trying to overwrite the laws in individual states. And because there's 18 states that currently provide the ability for trans athletes to participate in sports. And so this could have a long-term thing. And that's why but right now there isn't really, we need to advocate, but there's nothing bad is going to happen at this moment.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Schools are not going to lose money, but people need to ally. And the other thing that Jennifer said that I thought was really helpful too is talk to your legislators, talk to your schools, let them know that this is going to be okay, and that we're going to advocate, that we have hope anyway in that, and to reach out to our trans and non-binary friends and family members to say, listen, we got your back on this. So I think that's really important. Thanks. Let me see if there's any other questions. Hold on a second. Okay. How, this was a great question. How should kids approach their parents or caregivers about blockers or hormones? Do you have any advice for young people who want to bring their family on board?
Sure. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. And I would say, especially with young kids who can't make those decisions for themselves, because none of these decisions can be made if you're under 18. And that's unfortunate, but it's the way it is. So I frequently have these conversations with families who may be undecided still or need more information. So I would say find, if you're ready, if you're at the point where blockers are what you believe is the next step for you, then find a provider that you could potentially have a conversation with to bring the family in and to answer any questions. A lot of times I do a full session where we barely get to any of the intake questions. It's allaying parents' fears and just answering anything that might come up. And so, and I would say there are resources online. Obviously, there's True Colors, and there are other places that they can find information. But a lot of times, I think it's helpful. It's also helpful to get a therapist involved, to get somebody on board who can go through the process with them as well. So, as someone who practices gender affirming medicine, I don't necessarily believe that a therapist is required. I don't require a therapy letter to get somebody started on blockers. When somebody tells me that they're trans or non-binary or non-conforming, I believe them. That's just the way that it should be, I believe. But at the same time, a therapist can be really helpful for those family dynamics, for helping, because you're going to get a lot of where the kid gets frustrated. I see this all the time. I see the parents asking questions that the child thinks are just kind of silly and that they have already done their research on and that they have tried to probably time and time again address. And so it's more just for kind of navigating those dynamics that I think getting a therapist on board, someone who is gender affirming and understands the issues, can be a really helpful thing. But then also find a provider, find a doctor who is going to be able to answer those questions and talk you through this. And I think most of us are doing this because this is what we want to be doing and we want to be advocating. And so I think, there's if you contact a medical doctor that does blockers and that works with LGBTQ youth, they will more than likely be able to set up a visit to sit down with the family and address all of that.
That's great. So this time went very fast. So lots of thank yous and hearts on the Facebook and the YouTube page. So you should know that. Why don't we end by telling people how they can get in touch with you if they are interested in your gender affirming programs and services. And so, like, how do people find you?
Absolutely. So it's all been word of mouth. I don't advertise, but I do have a Facebook page. If you just search by my name, AJ Eckert, it will come up. Facebook hasn't let me change it to the GLAM Center for whatever reason, but that's where you will find the GLAM Center. And I'm very easy to get in touch with, so you can send a message through there. Dr. AJ's GLAM Center has an Instagram as well. I have the YouTube channel called Queering Health with Dr. AJ, where when people maybe aren't quite ready to reach out yet, but they want to get more of a sense of who I am and what I do, I usually send them over there as well. And then I do have my own website as well. It's Dr. AJ's GLAM Center, so DRAJSGlamCenter.com. But yeah, I mean, Googling all of that, and then there is I can say if you want, like, the phone number and all that stuff too, but it's.
Why don't you say it, because it will be up it's going to be online, so.
Okay, all right. So the office number for any questions, inquiries is 860-365-2446. And it's also textable because I'm an elder millennial, so I usually respond better to text, but I have had folks reach out that way, and that works really well. Like I said, Facebook, Instagram, my website, there's a form on the website too to fill out. And then my email is another good way, and that is office@drajeckert.com. So office@drajeckert.com. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for an appointment. If you have questions, that's kind of why I created a YouTube channel. I want to make sure I have a platform so that people can feel kind of comfortable and safe and ask what they want to ask without any judgment.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. AJ. I really appreciate your time, and we'll see you again really soon, I hope. So thanks, and the hearts are coming up on the thing. So thank you so much. Talk to you again soon. Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Am I? Oh, there we go. Oh, I can't hear you.
I had my mute on because I do this all the time. But before I let you talk, I do want to introduce you because, I have this whole thing I want to say about you. So I am so delighted to welcome to our second True Colors MiniCon series, Scott Turner Schofield, someone I've known for a number of years now, who's been at the conference and whose work I've been following. He is, and this is the list. They want me to turn the volume up. I can't turn the volume up. The volume's up as far as it goes. So maybe you just have to speak up, Scott, when it's your turn, but I'm talking as loud as I can. Can you hear me?
Sound fine to me.
Okay, good. All right. So Scott is an Emmy-nominated actor. Last week, Emmy-nominated actor, an activist, a writer, and a longtime friend of True Colors. He made television history as the first openly transgender actor in daytime television with a recurring role on CBS's The Bold and the Beautiful. He was Emmy-nominated just very recently. He was Emmy-nominated for his recurring role on Studio City, received international critical acclaim for his lead role in the 2010 feature film, The Conductor. His 3 one-man shows have toured major venues in the US and Europe. I had the pleasure to see several of them. If you get a chance, you need to do it once we can go back to actually having, live performances. The live performance, Becoming a Man in 127 Easy Steps, is now becoming a groundbreaking multi-platform adventure as a film, podcast, and book. Among other behind-the-scenes film credits in film, TV, and streaming, Scott consults for HBO's Euphoria. The role he helped created has been called TV's most interesting trans character. And he brings and I could go on because I think that it actually goes on, but what Scott brings is a creativity and authenticity that is really unique and something that I greatly admire. So welcome to True Colors, Scott. We're so glad to have you. Although I have to say, when I saw STS Brain in my thing, I was like, did I invite somebody with STS Brain? Oh, Scott, got you.
That's so funny. Thanks for reminding me. I don't know. Oh gosh, how do you even change this?
So the thing, it's
I'm on my phone.
Yeah. Oh, you're on the phone. Okay, so we'll just leave it as that. Oh wait, maybe I can change it. I don't know if I can change it. Can I change it? Yes, I can change it.
Thank you.
You want me to call it to it? Scott Turner.
Put my name in there. That'd be great.
All right. Yes.
Thanks.
There you go. All right, and then I'm going to put the speaker view so that you're up front. There you go. So I don't have, like a whole series of questions where I'm sure we're going to get questions from the audience. But maybe why don't you just, share a little bit about yourself and your history. Oh, wait, one more thing. Scott also has a video that's already up on our YouTube page. Please check it out. It's fabulous. And it really is great for clinicians and providers, as well as, just regular folks like us. So it's a really great video. You should check it out. All right, Scott, so why don't you just, start by telling us a little bit about yourself. And I do have to ask later what it was like. You already got asked. What does it feel like to be Emmy nominated? Abby later, just.
Sure. Boy, well, it's hard to talk about anything right now, given everything that's happening.
Yes.
It's really hard to have a personal career success, for instance. It's like, how do we take joy in a moment that is so scary and difficult and demoralizing for so many people? And so I'm kind of sitting here thinking about who's listening and thinking about, when I was a teenager, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I talk about this in the speech, the video, which we call dysphoria, which as opposed to euphoria, right? And I'm really in that speech looking at the dysphoria that I experienced. The more clarity I get on it, the more I understand how that was so much of a stumbling block for me as a trans person. And I offer the experiences that I had as a way of, perhaps you're experiencing this too, right? And maybe having the word dysphoria to attach to it will help you find better ways to approach it, ways that will help you, because we kind of we're starting to talk about like, oh yeah, how can I take care of dysphoria in my life? How can I take care of myself as I experience it? As opposed to, how do I deal with just sort of existential dread and anxiety, right? We kind of pare it down to make it more manageable. But I'm thinking about, as I said, I talk about growing up as a teenager in Charlotte, North Carolina, at a time when there was some really intense, severe homophobia happening in the public sphere. And, this was local politicians who were getting all over the news, who were cutting all of the arts funding for everything, not just a theater that had programmed a controversial play, but on gay themes, but also, after school programs and like the symphony, because they didn't want it to ever be used for gay purposes, if you can imagine, right? And they literally said that into the media. They said that on the radio and on TV. And so I, as a young person, experienced that, right? And when you are a teenager, this is what we know now from like a psychological perspective, right? It's not ageist. It's that the way that your brain is just biologically forming, the way that you are becoming who you are, it can feel like those big bad world things are all about you, right? And you can't stop it from feeling that way. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way, right? It's just part of where you are in this moment. And so I'm really thinking about young people right now with what's going on in Minneapolis and Louisville and really all over this country that has been going on for so long. I appreciated seeing a tweet that said, racism hasn't gotten worse, it's just being recorded.
Just being recorded. Let's just take 1 second and just say his name. George Floyd.
George Floyd, let's talk about George Floyd. And I also want to talk about Tony McDade, who was a transgender man who was murdered by the cops in Tallahassee, Florida yesterday, and misgendered by the press. And what had happened with Tony was that he was being attacked by men in his community in a transphobic attack. And he defended himself in self-defense, killed another person, and was then killed by police. And in that instance with Tony McDade, you see the layers of transphobia, that he as a Black man, also the transphobia, the racism, how that, just target after target after target on one person's back. Exactly. So I'm really thinking about, knowing what I experienced with all of this privilege that I have. And I'm just wanting to say to anybody who's listening to this, right, that the feelings that you're having right now are valid. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense that you would feel, like the world is a really bad and really, really difficult place right now. And I just want you to know that, there are so many of us here right now. Robin's here, I'm here, everybody who's watching this, everybody who's participating in this with you. We're with you. Mm-hmm. We care about you. We want you to feel safe. We're trying to make a safer world for you. And I know that I will use every privilege that I have, to stand in line and, stand on the front lines with you and protect you and take care of you in any ways that I possibly can. I want you to hear that because I didn't get to hear that when I was a young person and people were saying awful things about my community. So I just really want people to hear that.
I think, it's so important the way that the intersectionality and the combination of layers that, I'm thinking about the I don't know if you've heard that the Federal Department of Education wrote a letter yesterday against Connecticut because we support trans athletes being able to perform in the, as who they are. And I also think that, and this is something that keeps coming up for me, that the athletes that have been targeted are both young women of color. And so in my thinking around that it's that they're trans, but that they're also Black, and that it's another effort for white supremacy to try to control Black bodies. And so you can't have the conversation really about LGBTQ plus stuff without having the conversation about the intersectionality of the identities and the ways in ways right now, especially, it isn't that there's more racism. It's just that more people have cameras and I also echo what you said, to be able to be somebody who stands on the front line using the privileges that they have and being able to say, I see you, and to follow the lead of the Black folks and the people of color that are leading the work against white supremacy and racism. So
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for centering that. I think that's really great and really important. One of the things that you talk about in the video that's up on our YouTube channel and on your channels is that really everyone is dysphoric, right? That anytime somebody says you're a boy, you can't, or you're a girl, you have to, that's all examples of dysphoria. How did you sort of what was your journey like to come to that sort of broad recognition that this is about all of us, not just some of us?
It was a long, I mean, I have been out in June. It will be 20 years since
Wow.
since I had the personal revelation that I'm transgender. And I was very young at the time, and certainly young for my generation, to have realized that. I mean, now we have, young people who are really, actual children, right? Which is wonderful. Like, I'm so happy and that's an example of how the world is starting to wake up from its dysphoria, to recognize that, you are who you are and you can't change that. And why would you torture someone for being that, right? For being who they are, that we have to support each other in that. And that's a real gift of this time that we're living in that I didn't have 20 years ago, right? Or even really a few years ago, right? And so, it took a lot of just, I think it's one of the gifts of being transgender is I had a self-awareness for my entire life. And yes, that was rooted in pain. It was rooted in recognizing that I was different. I just recently, when you get a pop of fame, a self-consciousness comes up, right? What are people going to see? How are they going to critique me? Right? It's not all roses, right? And I immediately had this memory that I hadn't had in such a long time of being like 5 years old, standing outside. We used to live in an apartment complex, and when I was that age, and there were these two kids that I was friends with, brother and sister pair, and the sister was having a birthday party. And all of our friends, all of the kids from the complex were there. And I was standing outside and they had shut the door and they said, she can't come in because she dresses like a boy. And I had this deep memory of just standing there looking at all of my friends inside and physically, like literally having the door shut in my face and hearing she can't come in because she dresses like a boy. And that was the reason. And that, children, other kids were doing this to me, right? We talk a lot about how, children they get everything. They're so, and it's like, children are also awful, right? Like, let's be real, right? Simply because we have no tools, right? So, having that self-awareness for a really long time. And when I was, I talk about, as a content warning for the speech, I talk about multiple suicide attempts that I made, starting at a very young age. And at that time, then going to therapy, and it wasn't a great experience in the very beginning. It took several attempts at going to different therapists over many years as everyone's understanding about gender started to evolve, right? For me to finally meet someone, and even the best therapist I had in the beginning, I still had to teach her, right? And people use this as an excuse not to go to therapy, to say like, oh, I couldn't handle it. And I'm like, it's just interviewing. It's like a job interview. Have your question that if they don't answer it right, you say, great, thank you so much for your time. And you move on. You don't have to stay with someone, right? Right? That's important to know. And I've been through so many therapists and so many different kinds of therapy. I've really tried everything because I had this great pain. And I realized everybody has their work to do. Everybody has their flaws, right? But there's nothing wrong with me at like a deep level. I'm not a wrong human being. And I'm not a wrong human being, then why am I being told that I am? Why do I feel like I am?
Mhm.
And this conversation about dysphoria came up, right? So I started looking into what dysphoria was, and I started saying, oh, I've experienced dysphoria at all of these points in my life, and I never got the proper help for it. I was never able to just train my sights on it and say, this is what this is, in the same way that I also have a bipolar diagnosis. And it took me, I was, you know, pretty old when I got that diagnosis. I've been going to therapy for a long time when I got that diagnosis. And, you know, that there's like a way that you treat bipolar that's different from how you treat other depression, for instance. And so when you know that it's dysphoria, there's a way that we can treat it, right? And so having all of that awareness, finally, I was like, oh, now I have this new awareness. And awareness is constantly evolving. The more you pay attention, the more things unravel for yourself. You're always in process. You're always transitioning, right? So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's kind of a long answer anyway, right?
Yeah, I think it's a lifelong process. One of the questions that has just been rolling by is, you know, the issue of cis actors playing trans folks, so there's the one issue of cis folks playing trans folks, but then there's also the question of like, would you want to play a cis man? And and so like, what is like, how are those two? Are they different, or are they?
Yeah. So what we have to do is, so people, you know what happens when someone gets to say what the thing is about first, and that's what sticks in everybody's head.
Yeah.
Right. This is the danger of media and social media, right? What happened was people don't understand what we're actually asking for as trans actors. Okay. So on the one hand, you have the fact that trans actors just weren't even being looked at until like Laverne Cox. Let's think about Laverne Cox. That's like 2014. And there were a few other people before her. We had Little Pops. Alexander Billings has been around for a long time. Jasmine Creighton has been around for decades, right? You know, but just little tiny roles, right? I couldn't have gone in, this guy who I blend, I don't have to disclose that I'm trans if I don't want to. I have that great privilege, right? But I would just not be seen. They just wouldn't even have me in for the interview. Okay.
Right.
So if we think about it like employment discrimination, right? And look, I'm a perfect example. I'm a theater major at a school with a really great theater program, right? Emory University in Atlanta. Amazing theater program, got all A's in my theater program, right? They couldn't cast me because the plays that they were doing, my gender expression at the time, because I was pre-medical transition, right? Which I don't think everybody has to have, just put that clearly. But in my process, I was pre-medical transition, and they were like, oh, we don't know how to work with you. Now, to their credit, they said, you know what? I wrote a one-man show. I wrote my own story. And they said, we're going to produce that because you need to have the employment experience of having a lead role in a play. And if you have to write your own lead role, then we're going to get behind it. So to their credit, amazing. Now we get to Hollywood and they won't even see you for roles. So from an employment discrimination perspective, right? If I can play the role, I can play the role. And this is where the frame got on. They said, well, it's just about acting. Except it's not just about acting when you can't get in the room.
Right.
I have acting awards, right? I have toured for over a decade, right? I've gone to some of the biggest theater venues in the world and performed, okay? So it was pure bias, right? And so what we're saying is, then you have the other thing. Film and television wants to do authenticity. They really care about this. So I was on a production once where they paid a Navy SEAL $10,000 to come and teach the background artists, right? People who are getting paid $100 a day, not even the main characters, just the people in the background, right? How to hold a gun correctly so that it looks authentic, so that if someone in the military sees them holding a gun, they say, oh yeah, that's right. Or at least that's not wrong, right? So you want to tell me that when you're doing a show about a transgender woman who has taken hormones and right? Hormones change your skin. They change everything. They change how the fat of your face is deposited. And you're just going to put a cis man there, like, who has not the same amount of estrogen or progesterone. That's not authentic.
Right.
Right. And the only reason you're not doing it is because you won't even see a trans person for an audition.
Exactly.
Okay. So once we get to a level where that's gone, and that's what my generation, the transgender tipping point of, all of these actors who are out here right now, and there are so many of us, right? That's the door we're breaking down. And once, now we've got our feet in, we're all coming out and we're able to, we're playing trans characters for now. And I think pretty soon, in the next few years, people are going to say, you know what, like Scott, I don't even see that he's trans. Like, what does that even mean? He's an actor. Just let him be an actor. And hopefully they'll let us do that. And that is the goal. And once that's been going for a while, maybe anyone can play anything. I don't know yet. Right.
We can't have that conversation yet because there isn't an equal playing field.
Exactly. We've got to get to the equal playing field, and we're getting there.
Yeah. Great. So it felt weird to say this earlier, but so what did you feel when you found out that you were Emmy nominated? That everybody said, because I had heard that people writing about said worthy of an Emmy nomination, worthy, and then not just worthy, but actually got it. What was that like for you?
So in the very first moment, it was this, I had an out of body experience, like kind of like my body, because the ramifications for this in terms of my career, like what it means, I'll always be Emmy nominated. It doesn't matter even if I win.
Right.
I always have this Emmy nominated thing in front of me. And that hopefully, what that will mean for me is it's taken me so much of a fight just to get in the room, right? Just to be seen as an actor at all, even though I have such a big career before even making it to TV, right? Right. So now maybe I'll be at the same level as a cisgender dude, right? With like, who's like somebody's nephew and could just walk into an audition. No problem, right? But, right. So there's that piece of it. But actually what happened, the longer story around it is so the announcements were postponed because of coronavirus.
Right.
And so we were supposed to find out in like mid-March, and then they said, no, we're not going to do that. And then I just forgot about it because the whole world is upside down right now. Right. And the day before the announcement, the show producer called and said, okay, tomorrow we're going to find out about the Emmys. And I was like, man, I wish you hadn't told me, I really, because now I'm nervous. And I was like, why am I nervous? Why am I so nervous? Right? What's going on here? Because my life is actually, all things considered, my life is really good, right? I have become who I wanted to be. I'm out in Hollywood. I have an actual career. I am actually a movie star. Like I literally starred in a movie, which makes me a movie star, which is the dream from childhood. Like I've achieved who I am. I'm a movie star. I've done it, right? I've got a wonderful partner. We have a good life. So, right, everything's good. So what is this like, why am I worried about being rejected when all it'll mean if I don't get it is tomorrow will be the same as today? What is going on here, right? And I had to realize that was about all of this transgender worthiness stuff that comes up, right? My whole life I've been told I'm not good enough, and it bleeds into literally everything. And so I had a really long meditation about it, really kind of going like, having to sit there exactly what I told you and really be grateful for the things that are great in my life and really accept that things really are good in my life. And it doesn't matter. I'm not worth less if I'm Emmy nominated. I'm not even worth more. Maybe my career is advancing a little bit, but that doesn't change anything about who I am and my worthiness. And it was like, as soon as I really got that, I kind of like woke up from the meditation, like opened my eyes and was like, okay. And I forgot about it again. And I was literally, I'll tell you this, it's funny. I was literally on the toilet when he called. I was like, oh, okay, great.
Hold on while I blush.
yeah, mute, like.
Yeah, I one time walked into the bathroom with the mic still open, but I remembered to turn it off before anything happened. Listen, we only have 2 more minutes because you have a big Emmy thing happening right after this. This time went very fast. So let me ask you as a final question, what advice would you give to young people, especially LGBTQ plus youth who are interested in a career as an actor? What advice do you have for them?
Take any opportunity you can to practice. It is all about practice. When you practice, you're confident. When you practice auditioning, right? When you practice reading scripts, just pick a monologue, pick a paragraph out of a book and read it like an audition to yourself. You just have to practice and practice and practice. That's really it. And don't listen to anybody telling you can't do something.
Yeah.
I think those would be, no, people like to make rules out here about how you're supposed to audition and how you're supposed to show up. And I'm telling you, when you come in confident, when you come in and they see that you've got some experience under your belt, and it doesn't mean that you have to have roles. It means that you can walk into a room in front of a stranger and deliver a monologue like it's, talking to somebody naturally over breakfast, right? They go, that's it. It's not some magical star quality. Yeah. It's just experience. So practice, 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 and then go for it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate, having the opportunity to talk with you again, to have the opportunity for people who might not have met you before to actually meet you and see how in person, how wonderful you are. And congratulations on your nomination. And I know we'll talk again really soon. So
I look forward to it. So good to see you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
Take care.
You too.
Bye. All right, let me go back over here. So we got to the end of our 2 hours. I hope that it went as fast for you. And I'm sorry, I just came off screen, but I hope it went as fast for you as it went for me. And so I'm going to do 2 things. One, I'm going to tell you again about this little, for those of you who went to the conference before, that we did a fundraiser. We weren't able to do it. We've got $15,000 worth of stuff that we can't sell. But my sister-in-law really wanted to do something. So she made all of these handmade masks. They're in rainbow, lesbian, bi, pan, and asexual. There's organic 100% cotton, except for the pride flag, which is polyester. They're reversible, they're washable. We'll have ordering details soon, but one of the things that would be helpful for us is if you could just put in the notes in the comments, is that something that you would be willing to buy to help support our work on behalf of LGBTQ plus youth? And then the second thing is, all of the programming that we've been doing has been at no charge. If you like the free programming and you feel free to make a donation to support our work through the rest of the year. Our website is ourtruecolors.org, and you can just donate from there. And then lastly, very quickly, next week, we're going to be looking at the spectrum of sexuality. And there'll be a youth panel. There'll be Robin Oakes, sort of the queen of bi and pansexuality. And so watch over the next couple of days. We'll start posting about that. Thanks very much. Appreciate everything that you did and that you participating with us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.